In this lesson, we're going to extract away some of the redundant code into partials, okay, and get rid of the redundancies. So let's take a look at what this redundant code is that I'm referring to. So if you look at the new.html.erb, which is our form, this is virtually identical to the edit HTML ERB form, right? So there's redundancy there. If you look at the errors, the recipe errors any, this can easily also be moved to a partial, and that partial can be used by other objects and other controllers, right? Not just the new and edit under recipes. So if you had, let's say, chefs, which we're going to build later, if you had chefs and you had chef objects, they would also have errors. So we could use this and move it to a shared folder, and we could refer to that from there, right? Then we also have the title, which seems to have a common pattern. If you look at the edit and then the new, we can move this away to a title partial and then just provide the title and have anytime we need to provide a title, we can just render that title partial. And then if you wanted to change the formatting at a later time for titles and how they appear in each page, we just have to update the partial, and that'll take care of the formatting in all of the pages instead of going into each individual page and updating the formatting, right? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started. First thing I want to do is move all of this to a form, okay, a form partial. So under recipes, I'm going to create a new file and call it _form. Remember, all partials start with an underscore. Form.html.erb. Then I'm going to copy all of this. And then let me open up the file. I'm going to get rid of some of these tabs. I have way too many tabs open. Okay, so I'm going to paste that code over here in the form.html ERB. All right, now let me go back. Let me save this. If I go to the edit, actually, so let's take a look at this real quick. So what are the things that we have to change? Right over here, it's create recipe, so we have to account for this being used by edit recipe also. So this is something we're going to change. I don't think there's much more that we need to change here, but we'll keep note of that. So let's go to new. All right, and now we can go ahead and delete this code. And how are we going to refer, or how are we going to call that partial? All we're going to do is render. Oops, made a mistake there. Render form. That's it. Okay, so render form will look for this partial. Since it's in the same directory, I don't have to specify the directory, and then it's going to render this form. All right, now let's do the same for edit. Edit HTML ERB. Let's get rid of this. Now since we have the form partial, we can just go ahead and say render form. and then close the tag. All right, so we have the new and the edit both rendering the form. All right, now one update we have to make to our form partial is that right now, if you look at this, we are going to have the recipe object, since it's available in both the new and edit actions, and they're rendering the form. So the object, the @recipe object, which is the instance variable, is actually available to this form also. So we don't need to change any of this. What we do need to change is right here at the bottom where it says create recipe. We only want create recipe to show when a new recipe is being created, not when a recipe is being edited. Okay, so let's go ahead and make this change. We're going to add some Ruby code here. So if you open bracket, and then we're going to use this method called new record recipe dot new underscore record question mark. What does this new record do? It's a Boolean. So if this is a new recipe, then it basically returns true, otherwise returns false. Okay, and the way this method works, the way this works is if you do a new record, then put a question mark in there, then I want to say create recipe. So if this new record is true, I want this to submit with a create recipe being displayed on the link. Okay, else, and you put the else condition with a colon, and then I want it to show edit recipe. Okay, so let's look at that code again. If it's a new record, it's true. This question mark is going to see if it's true or not, then create recipe, otherwise edit recipe. Okay, and then I'm going to close this over here. So let's try this out. So the form partial should be working. Let's start our Rails server. So Rails server -b $IP -p port. Okay, so if I go to new recipe, it's still working. The new form is showing up. Okay, now let me look at the listing. Go to this, and then if I click on edit this recipe, that's also working. Okay, great. So the form partial is currently working. Now let's go ahead and type in, make an edit and submit it just to make sure everything's working. If I click in edit recipe, okay, your recipe was updated successfully. Perfect. All right, let's go back to our application. Now we're going to move this error to an error partial. Okay, so that I'm going to move to a shared folder because the error partial won't be exclusive to just the recipes folder. It'll be used by any other controller that we have over here or any other directory. So let me go ahead and do that. So click on views and then right click, new folder, shared, and right click on shared. Oops. Right click, new file, underscore errors.html.erb. Okay. Now from the form, I'm going to copy this code and then paste it here. Okay, we have to make a bit of an update here. So here, the @recipe is not going to be available, right? Because it won't be just @recipe, it could be anything. It could be any object. Since this is a shared error partial, we want to make this any object. So I'm going to pass in the object. So for this, I'm just going to call it obj for object. And then right here, I'm referring to recipe object also. So I'm going to change this to obj as well. Okay, there are no other references to @recipe. That should be enough for that one. Now in the form, I'm going to render the template, render the partial, render shared. Since it's in a different folder, I'm going to have to refer to it by the folder name, and then errors. And then I'm going to provide the object, right, that I'm passing in. So in this partial, remember, I still have the @recipe object. And in the errors, I'm looking for this obj, which is the reference to the object, right? So in the form, what I'll do is I'll pass in @recipe as the obj object, okay? And that should be it. Let's try it out. So if I go to new recipe, and then try to create recipe with the validations. Okay, it's working. Now I'm going to try editing a recipe. And then let me get rid of the name, so I get an error. Okay, perfect. That's working too. All right, great. So the last thing I want to do is if you look at all of our forms, or all of our templates here, index, new, edit, show, all of them seem to have this little title area over here, right? This edit one says edit recipe, then the then the new one says create new recipe. So all of them have this in common, and they seem to have the same formatting. Now this you can change later, but for our application, we're going to keep this simple for now. So I'm going to create a content title partial, okay? And I'm going to put that in the shared area also, because I want to use that anywhere. I'm going to use that throughout my application, not just exclusive to recipes. So let me go ahead and create that. It's under shared, new file. I'm going to call it page title.html.erb. And then I'm going to copy this. Okay, now the only thing here is that when you have, we can't say edit recipe in this, since this is a partial, right? So we want to provide the title here. So if I just say this, that should work, and then I will just send in the title. Now, in case you haven't noticed, these p tags really don't do much here, but if you want to add formatting later on, you can just leave them there and then add a class to it or something. But for now, we're just gonna leave it like this. We don't need to make any updates. And now let's go render the title. Okay, so first I want to render the title here in the index page. So our title says all recipes. All right, so let me go ahead. Render shared page underscore title. And then the same way as we did for the errors, we're going to provide the title. And this one, I believe it was all recipes, since this is the index page, all recipes. All right, so I'm going to copy this so that I can use it elsewhere also. All right, so that's the index. I want to use this in the new page also. Now this one will be create a new recipe. So here I'm going to provide create a new recipe. It should be in our edit page as well. So in the edit page, edit recipe. Okay, and then the last one is the show page. Right. So if I go to show, now here we have a little bit of a difference, right? Because this is no longer showing, this is not just a string. This is actually Ruby code. We're referring to the object name, right? But we can actually do the same thing here. If you just, now in the title, we can pass in recipe.name, and that should work. Okay, so let's go ahead and see how it looks currently. So I'm going to go to my home page. All right, so the index page, all recipes, great, that's working. I'm going to look at, this is the show recipe page, so the title is working here as well. Then edit recipe page, the title is working, perfect. And then new recipe page, title is also working, perfect. So that's all I wanted to cover in this lesson. But before we move forward, I want to make a commit because we've gone a good amount of time and not done a commit. So let's check git status. All right, so git space add -a git commit m create new and edit forms and partials. Now git status. Okay, great.